Thank you so much for being in conversation with me today about an important topic, food deserts. My name is Amir Muhammad, a soon-to-be eighth grade student, and I am honored to be interviewing Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III, pastor of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church and founder of BCFSN, or Black Church Food Security Network. How are you, Reverend?
I'm doing well, Mr. Muhammad. Thank you for having me.
Are you ready to hop into some questions?
I am ready.
Okay, so my first question is, what made you choose to help solve the problem of food deserts?
Yes, good question. One of the things that got me very interested in food was the connection that it has with health. I began to see members of my church. When I first started pastoring, I started to see members of my church have health issues and diseases. And I learned that they were diet-related diseases. And so I wanted to do something to help them with their illnesses. And food was the thing that came almost first to mind, just because of the nature of some of the health issues that they were having. So it went like this in my head. If we can help more people get nutrient-rich food, then it will help to promote greater health in them and perhaps in their families as well. So that was my chief motivation, wanting to help people.
While I was doing my research, I came across health issues too. And I put that into my project, such as diabetes, them not being able to process insulin.
Yeah.
So if you live in a food desert and all you can eat is sugary foods that come from fast food, your health issues will get worse. Mm-hmm. And I came across heart diseases, different things like that. So pretty much we're on the same wavelength there.
Absolutely. And actually, Mr. Muhammad, those are precisely some of the health challenges that I was seeing in the people back when we first got this idea. Diabetes was one of them, in addition to high blood pressure and cholesterol issues and heart disease. So yeah, you're exactly right. Those kinds of health challenges result in many respects from not having access to nutrient-rich food and not having agency, or in other words, not having the ability to decide what your community's food environment looks like in the first place. Because as you know, Mr. Muhammad, nobody in our community actually rallies and signs petitions to bring a Wendy's to the neighborhood. Nobody marches in the streets to demand that a McDonald's comes to our neighborhood. I've never seen that in my whole life. These decisions are made for us. Somebody makes a decision for us and say, we're gonna put a Wendy's right here and a McDonald's right there and a Burger King right there and a corner store right there. And these are all the kinds of places that have food that contribute to those health challenges. And so I don't just organize for food access, meaning people's ability to obtain nutrient-rich food, but I also organize for food agency, meaning that local communities should have the right to define what their community's food environment looks like in the first place.
So for the next question, you already answered it during what you said. So I'm going to change up what I'm going to.
Okay.
So when did you realize that food deserts were mostly in Black and brown communities?
What a question. Mr. Muhammad, I realized that, and let me put a quarter in the meter right there and park the car, because you know, the term food desert is one, when I first started, I would utilize that term. And because I thought it best described what I was seeing. as I served as kind of like a word detective, I was trying to figure out where that phrase came from. Who came up with that phrase to describe Black communities? And when I learned that someone from outside of our community came up with that phrase to describe our community, it made me say, wait a minute. Let me pause a little bit on that term, because it doesn't even come from our community. And then the other thing is, to call a Black neighborhood a desert can trick us into overlooking all of the resources that are found in that community that may be invisible to people who don't live there. But I would imagine that you would know those who live in a community have the best view of what the assets or what the resources are in that community. Finally, I'll say, I kind of liked watching National Geographic kind of stuff growing up and reading their magazines and the like. And I remember studying deserts in like National Geographic, and deserts to a less familiar observer looks like a place where there is no life. But those who really study deserts, they can tell you where the water is. They can show you where life abounds. So deserts are not a lifeless place from that standpoint. And so what that really gave me a lot of pause concerning the term. And then a woman named Karen Washington, co-founder of Black Urban Growers, introduced me to a term I'd never heard before. Instead of food desert, Karen Washington used the term food apartheid. And apartheid is a word that literally means, apartness. I don't know if you're a rising 8th grader, so I don't know if you would have studied the South African apartheid or even heard of that. Does that ring a bell for you at all? So that might be our next interview, apartheid in South Africa. And it basically, I could say, apartheid in South Africa is like Jim Crow in the United States. A set of laws that formalized the oppression of Black people. So when Karen Washington called these same places that I was calling food deserts, but when she called it food apartheid, it made me recognize that these communities have been targeted by a range of factors that created the dynamics of hunger and food insecurity. The Black people who lived there didn't do it. This was politicians and corporations. This is city planners and zoning. I realized that these neighborhoods were designed to be places where healthy food sources were not found. So I started using the term food apartheid or food apartheid zones to describe what is happening, because it puts us in better knowledge of the fact that there are layers of dynamics that made this community look the way it does and not having nutrient-rich food sources available. So back to your question, when did I realize? When I started to do the study on how Black communities were designed, who designed them, when they were structured and organized, I started to see that this is an old problem in the country. As early as the 1930s, the United States government was drawing up the maps for cities like Baltimore and Detroit and Gary, Indiana and Brooklyn. And when they drew up the maps, they drew it up so that the Black people lived in the places with the worst soil, with the fewer resources. They made sure that Black people lived by the railroad tracks and the cemeteries. They drew up the maps to make sure that Black people lived by the toxic dumps so that there were environmental poisons and pollutions all over. It wasn't accident, it was by design. And so it really is, it really has been a continuous journey of learning. And I'm still learning, which is why I'm grateful for your questions, because you're making me think even more about not only what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it.
Like, I never thought about it that way. Like, I would never think, like, people have been doing this whole time. Like, it's been years since 1930. In fact, since they made a map to put Black people in areas that were worse than white areas. And I'm sure that the white people were put into places with great soil. They weren't next to anything that was bad, such as railroads. I would never think to say it was by design during my research. But now that I hear that from you, I'll be using that it was by design that Black people were treated worse, that we were put in these places, and it's still happening now.
Yes, yes. And what they want us to believe, and when we log off, I'm gonna send you the map that they made of Baltimore so you can look at it yourself. And if you look at the map that I'll send you from the 1930s and compare it to the present day map, if you lay the maps on top of each other, you'll see that the same challenges that were present in the 1930s are still here in 2021. It's a very old problem. But you know what, Mr. Muhammad? They want us to believe that we are the problem. They want us to believe. They don't want us to know it was a designed thing. They want us to believe, and they want others even outside of our community to be fooled into believing that our neighborhoods are dirty because we're dirty. Our neighborhoods are crime laden because we like crime. That our neighborhoods are unhealthy because we like to be unhealthy. That's what they want us to believe. And the more that they can get us to believe that, the more they can hide behind the curtain and escape accountability and responsibility for what they have done and what they are still doing today.
I hate to move on. I would just love it. But let's get to the next question. So, let me ask about that, like, because I enjoyed talking about that and how it's by design. How do you personally feel about it being by design? Like, does it make you feel a certain way? Does it make you think a certain way? Does it make you want to act? What does it make you think of when you think of, like, the word that it was by design?
Wow. You know, no one has ever asked me how it makes me feel. I get asked, what did it make me think? I get asked, what did it make you do? But I've never been asked, how does it make you feel? So you're inviting me into a space that is a new area for me, at least on this topic. And as I'm checking in with myself, I feel sad. I feel sad. And I feel sad for our people. I feel sad that we can't. I feel sad that this power structure and the people that make it go think that low of us and do not regard us as being made in the image of God. I feel sad, and I also feel angry. I feel angry because as a pastor, I also see the end result of this design. I'm the one who has to bury people in the community, many of them who seem to have died far before their time because they have been burdened by the design of a racist power structure. And so I see the fallout. I see the fallout of the families trying to, in their grief, figure out how they're going to move forward without their loved one. Or I see the fallout of people not being fully healthy and able to flourish and just enjoy life to its fullest. So it makes me sad, it makes me angry, and it makes me feel reflective, meaning I think very deeply about how I can personally live against that design. I know we're going to get to my organization in a moment, but even personally, I get reflective and I think very deeply. I meditate very deeply. I get thoughtful and quiet, and I think the word is pensive as well, because I want to make choices every day that undo their design. I want to, even though I know it's hard, I want to be healthy. I want to be whole. I want to be joy-filled and joyful. I want to live a long life. I want to be a pop-pop one day. I want to see what that's like. And I don't want their design to rob me of what it is that I wish to do and want to do in terms of seeing the fullness of how my life plays out. That's how I feel. Those are a few thoughts on how I feel.
You said a lot of things that are just great, like racist power structure and how you yourself, you want to be healthy, want to be joyful, also want to be a pop-pop one day, you want to know how that feels. And because of this racist power structure, people like us, they cannot get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I understand how you feel, because you said you feel sad, you feel angry, but you do feel reflective over what has happened. And I don't know what to say after that.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'll say, let me add one more, Mr. Muhammad. I also feel a sense of, what is this feeling I'm feeling? I feel, I don't know, it's something deeper than happy, but for the sake of time, I'll just say happy. The happiness I feel is that I have a deep sense of purpose, that this design that makes me so sad and angry, in an ironic way, has also given me a target that gives me a sense of fulfillment in my life. I have something to do every day. I'm focused on a goal every day. There's objectives calling my name. And there are things that I feel that I am uniquely here to do. Like the Almighty was like, look at that design. That's so racist. That's so terrible. That's so ugly. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna send a Heber Brown III. And that Heber Brown III will be a part, not by himself, but he'll be a part of the ones who will make things right. And in that way, I feel like I have a job, I have a purpose, I have a role, I have a contribution to make. And while my contribution alone cannot fix everything, everything cannot be fixed without me making my contribution. It's kind of like those 1,000-piece puzzles you've seen. And there have been times when I put together the puzzle, and only when I got all the pieces in place, I realized I was missing a piece or two. And I was like, oh man, the picture's almost there, but I'm missing a piece or two. And I get angry because I'm like, I want to finish it. Well, I feel like there's a lot of puzzle pieces in place and a lot of people who are doing amazing things to challenge and undo that design. But the picture will not be complete until I put my puzzle piece alongside other people's puzzle piece. Similarly, the picture will not be complete until you, Mr. Muhammad, put your puzzle piece alongside those of your community so that together the picture is completed.
Okay, I hate to move on.
Yes.
But I'd like to ask, who inspired you to help solve this problem in the community?
There were many people, but for the sake of time, I'm going to tell you about one of them. And it's actually the ancestor. Well, let me say the two of them right over my shoulder. One of them is this dynamic ancestor who you may recognize, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Minister Malcolm X. He helped to inspire me because of his sharp analysis of what the problem was and the beautiful and eloquent way that he inspired Black people to stand up and do for ourselves and create what we need for ourselves. He also said that revolution is based on land, that land is the basis of revolution. And because there's no land factories on the planet, the land that we have is the land that we have, and we have to honor it and utilize it the best of our ability. Another person that inspired me, many people called him the Christian Malcolm X. His name is Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., C-L-E-A-G-E, Clegg. And he started a church called the Shrine of the Black Madonna. He believed in the divine feminine. He argued for Black people to utilize their existing resources and assets to grow their own food. And what he really wanted to do was to create a nationwide Black-led, Black-owned food system. He said this in the late 1960s and 1970s. And he actually led his church into buying 4,000 some acres of land in South Carolina so they could grow food for Black America. I was so inspired by his example that it helped me to do even more in the work that I'm doing with the Black Church Food Security Network. So those are two of many ancestors and elders who have inspired me.
Great inspirational figures. So you thought that Malcolm X had sharp analysis skills, and you admired that from him. And Reverend Clegg, he's just like you in a sense, because you have the same initiative that he does, or is your initiative a bit different, or is it the same in some ways?
That's good. Great question. It's a little bit different. Reverend Clegg wanted to have one mega farm for all of Black America. I see how he could say that. And as I studied, I realized how difficult it would be to create one mega farm for all of Black America. So instead, our effort is to create a constellation of church gardens and churches that buy from Black farmers and help their food get across the country. Essentially, our vision today is to create a food supply chain. That's what we're doing. And a supply chain is simply like a pipeline. It's like a method through which you move something from one place to the next. So we're trying to create a food pipeline that goes from Black farms to the Black community and from Black churches to the Black community, Black church land to the Black community, because as you may know, Mr. Muhammad, Black churches collectively own a lot of land. But I'm intentionally using the word constellation because I am a stargazer. I love looking at the stars. And if you look at the stars just right at night, many times you can see a picture in the sky. But the picture is only possible because of the arrangement of all the stars. And so in that way, we're a little bit different than Reverend Clegg's argument. Instead of having one, we want a whole bunch of them. And toward that end, I do think it's important that every generation honor and revere and study the generations that came before them, but not in such a way to exactly replicate every single thing they did, but rather to build on what they did, to build upon it, to add another block to it, to take it one more step. And I fully expect that you, Mr. Muhammad, and your generation will see the work that perhaps I'm doing, the work that your mother is doing as a dynamic organizer and professional. And while you can honor what we have done and attempted to do, I know that your mother, and I know what I want for my children, I want y'all to grow beyond where we took it. Take it a little bit higher, because you're gonna know stuff that I don't know and experience stuff that I don't experience. So of course you should do something that I've never done. So that's the way that I treat even our ancestors behind me on both sides. I revere and honor them. I pour water, I call their names, I pour libation. And everything that I hear them whisper in my ear is like, go Heber, go Heber, do a little bit more. And so that's what we're doing.
What a nice segue into the next question. So this is a two-part question, so I'm going to say the two parts, and then if you want, you can answer the question full.
Okay.
So the first part is, how long have you been a reverend? And when did you think of using historically African-American churches to set up the BCFSN, or Black Church Food Security Network?
This November will mark my 21st year as a minister, 21 years. And in terms of when did I think about churches? I thought about churches because I spend a whole lot of time in church, and it's a natural place for me. And I was just thinking about like all the times we use food or we're eating in church. Churches eat a lot of food, and food is in the picture a lot. So I was like, this is kind of like a food organization. It's like one of Black people's food organizations. Food is everywhere in the picture. And so it came to mind for that reason. But, you know, I've never thought about this part of my response until you just asked me this. But I think another reason that historically African-American churches make sense is that when I think about the Underground Railroad, that wasn't like thousands upon thousands of years ago when the Underground Railroad was being utilized. A number of the stops along the way from slavery in the South to the North, a number of the stops along the way were churches. that formerly enslaved Africans would go hide in the church and then go to the next place and the next place. So I'm like, if the institution or institutions that helped Black people get free from slavery, chattel slavery, is still here, why not dust it off and use it for this purpose as well, where we go from being enslaved to a food environment that makes us sick, and we utilize the Black churches like stops along the Underground Railroad to find our way to food freedom. And so that's why I focus on the Black church. I will say, Mr. Muhammad, as well, given all the land that Black churches own, and the kitchens and the classrooms and the parking lots and the buses, I know a lot of that stuff sits without use Monday through Saturday. So I'm saying, if it's gonna sit there, why not use it during the week to help our people get free? It shouldn't be that we have all this stuff and we only use it one day out of the week. Let's find a purpose for this stuff that we already own. Let's find a purpose for it every single day. And that's why I focus on the Black church.
So this will be one of my last questions. And since I am creating this question out of my head,
okay,
I'm gonna go back to the design because I really like that topic.
Okay.
And like when you saw the map for the first time,
mm-hmm.
What were you thinking at that moment, if you can remember?
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about was the number of years that I thought that I or my community had the final say in what my neighborhood looked like. For years, I've been hearing about the importance of my voice and my vote and my this and my that. And I realized, in looking at the map, that while all of that is important, raising my voice is important, standing up for myself is important, all that's still important. But what I realized was there was other voices that seemed to be louder than mine and had a greater say over what happened in my community. So like Mr. Muhammad, down to where the street lights are located on your street, somebody made that decision for you. Down to where the playground is located, down to whether or not your street is a one-way street or a two-way street, down to whether or not your local neighborhood as a farmer's market or a grocery store or other spaces and places for healthy food options. Somebody made that decision. And I was like, all these years, I thought Black people decided this. How wrong I was. Other folk decided this for us. But once I realized it, I was like, all right, bet. Now it's just time to organize my own community so that if my one voice all by itself is not enough, fine. I'll bring hundreds of voices and we will work together. And in the words of one of our great ancestors, Stokely Carmichael, whose name eventually he changed his name to Kwame Ture, he would always say, organize, organize, organize. That's what your mother does. That's what I do. That's what a range of other people do. They organize, meaning bring people together to agree on making a change on something that they all care about. We organize. We don't wait for politicians to come save us. We don't wait for corporations to pity us and take mercy on us and give us a grocery store because we're begging for that. No, I am too proud to beg, at least for something that I believe is a fundamental right. But instead of waiting for any of that, get the right grant to get the right money so we can feed our children. No, no, no. I ain't waiting for y'all. Not when it comes to food, because we got to eat. So we're going to organize and do what we need to do to transform that reality together.
Well, thank you for answering all my questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for asking them. It's been a phenomenal interview. You are ready for prime time, Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you.
You're welcome.